Here are the 3 security stories to act on today. Exposed MCP servers that can let outsiders invoke AI automation tools, a chain of high-severity datamodel-code-generator CVEs that turns untrusted schemas into SSRF, local file read, DNS-rebinding, and generated code execution risk, and an apache-airflow-providers-fab provider issue where Azure AD OAuth tokens may be accepted without signature verification. The main takeaway: AI and developer automation tools are now control plane software. Patch them, sandbox them, and do not leave them reachable from networks they do not need. First, CVE 2026-9680 affects the Alibaba Cloud RDS OpenAPI MCP server. NVD describes improper exposure of the MCP server. A remote attacker can invoke exposed MCP tools through network access to an MCP endpoint listening on all network interfaces by default. The listed CVSS score is 5.8, medium. But the business impact depends on what the MCP server is allowed to do. MCP, the Model Context Protocol, is designed to connect assistants and agents to external tools. In an RDS context, that may mean database inventory, account information, operational queries, or workflows that developers expect to be reachable only by a local assistant or a trusted service. This is why defenders should read this as an automation exposure story, not just an AI story. A chat interface might look harmless, but an MCP server is a bridge between natural language tooling and real backend actions. If that bridge is bound to every interface, reachable from a shared cloud network, or accidentally published through a reverse proxy, the risk changes. The right first step is inventory. Search for MCP servers, developer tool daemons, and agent connectors that listen on 0.0.0.0, on container ports, or on cloud hosts. Bind them to localhost or a trusted interface, put firewall rules in front of them, require authentication where the project supports it, and review logs for unexpected tool calls. Second, there is a cluster of datamodel-code-generator issues. This tool generates Python data models from OpenAPI, JSON schema, GraphQL, Avro, Protobuf, raw JSON, YAML, CSV, and related inputs. In modern teams, that often runs in CI, on developer laptops, or inside build workers that can reach package registries, metadata services, secret stores, and internal APIs. That placement is useful, but it makes parser bugs and reference resolution bugs more dangerous. CVE 2026-55391 is rated 8.2 high. NVD and the GitHub advisory describe server-side request forgery through URL schema fetching and redirects. In plain English, a schema fetching feature can be abused to make the tool request loopback, private, link local, metadata, or other reachable resources. GitHub lists the fix in datamodel-code-generator 0.61.0. If you use the tool with the URL option or remote schemas, prioritize this quickly. The defensive move is not only to upgrade, but also to restrict where build jobs can connect. A CI runner that cannot reach metadata endpoints or internal admin panels is far harder to turn into a useful SSRF pivot. CVE 2026-55389 is rated 7.5 high. It concerns JSON schema references and arbitrary local file reads. Before version 0.62.0, reference resolution could allow file references or traversal patterns to read local files instead of staying contained to the intended schema directory. That matters because model generators often run near source code, environment files, dependency cache directories, and credentials used by automation. Upgrade to 0.62.0 or later, and treat untrusted schema archives like untrusted source code. Do not process them in a workspace that contains production secrets. CVE 2026-55391 is also high and involves DNS-rebinding. The advisory says URL host validation happened once, but the HTTP client could resolve the host again for the connection. That can bypass private network protections if a hostname changes answers between validation and use. The fix is listed in version 0.63.0. This pattern is important beyond one package. Any security check that validates a network destination before a later connection needs to defend against rebinding and time of check, time of use gaps. CVE 2026-55415 is high and affects generated Python imports. The advisory says attacker-controlled schema extensions such as XPython import or custom type paths could influence generated import handling, allowing a new line to break out of an import statement and execute Python code when the generated model is imported. GitHub lists the fix in version 0.64.0. This is a strong reminder that generated code is still code. If your workflow fetches a third-party schema, generates Python, and then imports that output automatically in tests or services, you have a supply chain path. Pin datamodel-code-generator to 0.64.0 or later, review generated diffs, and separate generation from execution. The safest practical baseline for this whole datamodel-code-generator cluster is simple: upgrade to at least 0.64.0, pin that minimum in your lock files and CI images, disable remote references unless you truly need them, allow list known schema hosts, run generation in a sandbox without cloud metadata access, mount workspaces read-only where possible, and do not import generated code until it has passed review or automated checks. If you accept schemas from customers, partners, issue reports, pull requests, or public repos, isolate that path from your normal developer credentials. Third, CVE 2026-55243 affects the apache-airflow-fab provider before 3.7.3. The advisory says the Azure AD OAuth login path defaulted verify_signature to false when decoding the ID token. An attacker able to present a forged or unsigned ID token to the OAuth callback could bypass authentication and log in as an arbitrary user, including a user with the admin role. The advised fix is to upgrade apache-airflow-providers-fab to 3.7.3, where verify_signature defaults to true. Airflow is often a high-value target because it orchestrates jobs, credentials, data movement, and production workflows. So even if exploitation conditions vary by deployment, this deserves fast attention from platform teams. For Airflow, patch the FAB provider, confirm token signature verification is enabled, review Azure AD and OAuth configuration, and check web server access logs for unusual callback activity or suspicious admin logins. Also review who has the admin role and whether any service accounts or stale users could amplify the impact of an authentication bypass. If your logs show signs of suspicious access, rotate credentials available to Airflow connections and variables, and inspect recent DAG changes or task executions. Zooming out, today's stories have a common theme. AI tooling, schema tooling, and workflow orchestration are all convenience layers that sit close to valuable systems. The controls are also common: know what is exposed, patch quickly, minimize network reachability, isolate untrusted inputs, review generated code, and make logs useful enough to answer what happened. None of the advice requires panic. It does require treating developer automation as production security surface. Your checklist for today: close or firewall exposed MCP listeners, upgrade datamodel-code-generator to 0.64.0 or later, disable or constrain remote schema references, run schema generation in a sandbox with no metadata service or internal admin access, review generated Python before importing it, upgrade apache-airflow-providers-fab to 3.7.3, verify OAuth token signature validation, review authentication and tool call logs, and rotate credentials if suspicious access appears. Sources are in the description. This briefing is defensive only and includes no exploit code, payloads, or step-by-step attack instructions.